Max Corwin sat in the comms tower outside Denver, chewing a stick of stale gum and flipping through a dog-eared notebook of emergency codes he never thought he'd actually use. He'd done 12 years in the Air Force and got kicked out for punching a superior officer during a diplomatic op. Since then, he ran this skeleton crew observatory like a prison warden with nothing left to guard. But tonight, something didn't sit right. Something's jamming deep space channels. His tech guy, Ronnie, muttered. It's not solar interference. This is deliberate. Max stood slowly, his bones cracking like old wood. He'd learned long ago that when the silence was too clean, something monstrous was crawling underneath it. Then, at 2:17 hours, the sky split. Not with fire, not with alien ships shooting lasers like in the movies. No, it was worse. It was precision. An entire fleet blinked into orbit like they'd always been there, cloaked until they didn't want to be. Ronnie's mouth opened. No sound came out. Max slammed his fist on the red alert switch. Sirens howled across the mountain, but they were already too late. Earth had always been arrogant, politicians preaching peace treaties with species that hadn't even been confirmed real yet. The Global Council had laughed off rumors of the others like drunk kids around a campfire. They thought Earth was evolving. They thought humans were part of a galactic democracy. They were wrong. Half the council died that morning. Not assassinated, erased, memories wiped, identities shattered like glass. Whoever these invaders were, they weren't here to negotiate. They didn't even talk. In a dark war room deep beneath Geneva, the remaining council members, leaders of the so-called United Earth Bloc, sat frozen. The screens flickered with symbols they couldn't decipher. Cities across the planet lost power. Satellites were crashing like hail. And then a single message broadcast across all frequencies. No voice, just a waveform, and 2 words in every human language. You're farmed. It hit like a cold slap. No demands, no formal invasion, just a declaration. Max watched it unfold from his mountain bunker. The council's silence. That wasn't diplomacy. That was fear. Real, bone-deep terror. These weren't conquerors. They were collectors. Sir, Ronnie whispered, pointing at the scope. One of them's looking at us. What the hell does that mean? Max barked. I mean, it stopped. The ship. It's above us. A piercing hum filled the air. Max felt pressure in his chest like a truck had parked on him. The walls vibrated. Metal groaned. Then Ronnie's eyes rolled back, and he dropped, convulsing. Blood trickled from his nose. Max didn't run. He walked to the emergency locker, grabbed a rusted shotgun from an age-long past, and loaded it slowly. Not because he thought it'd work, but because every damn time some other power tried to put a boot on Earth's neck, some bastard somewhere stood up with a weapon anyway. He looked at Ronnie's twitching body. You picked the wrong mountain, freaks. He muttered. Outside, something landed. Quiet. No thunder. No flame. Just presence. Whatever was out there didn't want to fight. It wanted compliance. Too bad it landed in the wrong country. The smell hit first. Metallic, sterile, like burnt ozone and something rotten underneath. Max gritted his teeth, shotgun in hand, and stepped outside the comms station. The wind had died. The forest below, usually alive with coyotes and rustling trees, was silent. Dead silent. Something hovered 30 feet above the clearing. No wings, no engines, just a matte black shape with edges that didn't make sense, like reality was trying to erase it but couldn't keep up. He could feel it inside his skull, scratching like nails on wet chalk. Thoughts that weren't his. Emotions that didn't belong. They weren't speaking. They were digging. Max fired anyway. The shotgun blast shattered the night. He didn't expect it to work, but the motion mattered. The defiance. He wasn't going to stand there and be analyzed like cattle waiting for slaughter. The thing shimmered. For a second, it flickered out of sync with the world, then reformed. No damage. But it reacted. It pulled back, just an inch. And that was enough. He dove for cover behind a boulder as the hum spiked. The air vibrated so hard his teeth ached. A pulse hit the tower, blue energy rolling through metal like it was scanning every molecule. Lights exploded. Sparks rained down. Ronnie was gone. His body vanished. Not bloodied, not burned, just gone. Max lay still, forcing his breathing to slow. He needed to think. Needed to remember. His old training kicked in. Stay low, stay quiet. If they can read your thoughts, you better think like prey until it's time to strike like a predator. Then came the memory. One from his last mission in Syria. A classified encounter buried in a mountain of NDAs and threats. One of their drones had picked up something not human near a fallen satellite. The Pentagon had covered it up fast, calling it a glitch. But Max had seen the photos. Had felt the same static buzz in his teeth. He should have known then. Earth wasn't being left alone out of respect. They were being cultivated. Across the world, the chaos was spreading. In Moscow, drones hovered over Red Square, paralyzing crowds with frequency bursts that shut down neural pathways. People collapsed like puppets with strings cut. In Johannesburg, a fleet silenced the air, literally. No sound, no speech, just blank-eyed compliance. But in Detroit, something different happened. A warehouse full of old war vets and street mercs, former operatives turned black market smugglers, saw what was happening and opened fire. The bullets didn't kill the invaders. But they learned fast. Every time a group resisted, the invaders withdrew slightly, repositioned, recalculated. They weren't used to pushback. They weren't gods. They were tacticians, efficient, cold, but cautious. That was Earth's opening. Max scrambled back into the tower, yanked the backup generator switch, and slammed a code into the emergency military relay. No encryption, no filter. Just a raw message to every resistance fighter, rogue cell, and forgotten grunt with a radio. They don't talk, they don't ask, they take, but they step back when we hit back. You want to live? Fight. Aim for the eyes, if they've got 'em. No surrender. This ain't about peace. This is harvest. Make them bleed. Max Corwin out. He didn't care if the council heard it. Didn't care if he'd just triggered a death sentence. This wasn't their world anymore. The suits failed. The diplomats vanished. Now it was the dropouts, the failures, the punished soldiers and street-born wolves who were rising. Outside, the black shape hovered again. But it didn't come closer. It didn't scan. It was watching. Max stared back, blood on his cheek, hands shaking but firm. "You better send more," he whispered. "You're going to need a lot more." Because Earth wasn't just a farm. It was a graveyard waiting to be filled, one way or the other. The next 48 hours were pure madness. Max didn't sleep, didn't eat. He ran on fury and instinct, surviving off decades of suppressed muscle memory and raw, grinding rage. The signal he'd sent was spreading faster than anyone expected. Pirate radio, old military tunnels, underground hacker groups, even abandoned oil rigs in the Gulf started pinging back. Earth's real defenders weren't wearing medals. They were ex-cons, dishonorably discharged soldiers, and back-alley engineers who didn't wait for permission. And the council? Gone. Radio silence. After the first wave hit Geneva, what was left of the bureaucrats fled into their bunkers, waiting for someone else to win the war they didn't understand. But Max did. He was heading south now, through old logging roads in an armored jeep, patched together with military scrap and duct tape. He'd picked up a few others. Real fighters. There was Danik, a Ukrainian sniper with one lung and a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. and Reza, a Persian engineer who used to design surveillance drones for the highest bidder, until they tried to erase him. They weren't heroes, they were survivors, and every one of them had lost something already. "They took my wife," Danik said one night, loading his rifle by the fire. "Didn't even touch her, just made her walk off the balcony like she wasn't real, like she didn't even know me." Max didn't respond. He'd seen it too many times already. People turning into shadows of themselves. Minds gutted without a trace. The invaders didn't need to kill. They just deleted. "Why us?" Reza asked, tapping on his cracked tablet. "Why Earth? We're barely a speck in this galaxy. What do we have that they want?" Max stared into the flames. "Because we fight dirty." They both looked at him. He continued, voice low and steady. "We're not evolved, not like they are. That's why they don't understand us. We lie, we cheat, we burn bridges and shoot first, we hold grudges for generations. You don't farm a species like that unless you plan to bleed for it." The next morning, they reached the coordinates sent by a rebel cell in New Mexico. What they found wasn't an army, it was a graveyard of drones. Dozens of them, piled up like metal carcasses, each marked with makeshift symbols. Human hands had done this. Homemade weapons, old EMP charges, some kind of magnetic field pulse that scrambled their internal mapping. There was a man waiting for them, gaunt, pale, eyes wide with adrenaline. He held a flare like a priest holding a torch. "You Max?" he asked. Max nodded. The man grinned. Then welcome to the butcher shop. They were led underground into an old missile silo, long abandoned by the government, now turned into a weapons lab fueled by desperation. Scrap metal lined the walls. Alien tech torn from downed ships sat next to antique rifles. Kids barely 18 were welding gear next to ex-military ghosts with 1,000-yard stares. "We call ourselves the Dead Grid," the man said. "No signals, no uplinks. We stay dark. That's how we survived the first wave." "What do you need from us?" Max asked. "Proof," the man said, "that the fight's not over." Max didn't flinch. "Then point us at something worth killing." That night, they launched their first coordinated strike. Not on a ship, not on a drone, but on a relay tower, one of the beacons planted by the invaders to control frequency fields around cities. That's how they puppeted people, scrambled thoughts, controlled movement. The Dead Grid hit it with everything they had. Homemade explosives, hacked military-grade jammers, and one of Reza's crude but brilliant reverse pulse bombs made from an old car battery and alien circuit boards. It worked. The tower collapsed, sending a ripple through the air like a scream without sound. People in the area, hundreds of them, collapsed, then woke up screaming, free for the first time in days. But the invaders responded fast. Too fast. Within minutes, 2 harvest ships appeared. Silent. Ominous. They didn't attack, didn't speak, just hovered. Watching. Calculating. Max stood at the edge of the blast site, rifle slung over his back. He raised both middle fingers towards the sky. "Come on, then," he muttered. "Come down here and try it." The sky trembled, but they didn't move. They weren't sure anymore. Earth wasn't breaking. It was organizing. They came at dawn, not with a full invasion force. That would have been easier to understand. No, they came with silence and subtlety, with precision that made human warfare look like drunken brawling. 1 second the morning light glowed over the canyon walls. Next, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Birds vanished mid-flight, and everyone's breath turned visible. Max felt it before he saw them. That weight behind his eyes, that itching paranoia crawling up the back of his neck, a presence pressing on his thoughts like cold fingers searching for weakness. The air shimmered, something uncloaked above them, sleek, obsidian, no visible seams or edges, like it had been carved from a nightmare. Its surface rippled like liquid, absorbing the desert sun instead of reflecting it. Then it released a low hum, not loud, but deep, like it came from beneath the earth. Max turned to Danik. "This is a message." Danik grunted. "What kind?" Max loaded his rifle. "The kind that ends with someone in pieces." Before they could scatter, the beam dropped. It wasn't fire. It wasn't plasma. It was light, pure white, with a tinge of something wrong in its core. The kind of light that felt like it could erase memories. It hit the canyon floor. Anyone standing within 50 feet disappeared. Not blown apart, not vaporized, just erased, like they'd never existed. The sand beneath their boots was untouched. No bodies, no burn marks, just silence. Panic tore through the camp. Razor dragged 2 teenage fighters into a ditch, while Danik dropped to a prone position and started firing at the ship's underbelly. The bullets sparked uselessly off the hull, but it gave Max cover to move. He sprinted toward the comm tent, sliding through dust and loose cables, heart pounding like a war drum. He yanked open the panel on their field emitter, a jerry-rigged transmitter that Reza had turned into a frequency disruptor, and jammed his fist against the reset switch. Come on, he growled. A burst of static exploded in his earpiece. The air shimmered again. The beam wavered, faltered. One of the ship's low hums cracked, like a machine coughing. Then something screamed inside Max's head. It wasn't human, wasn't even animal. It was pure rage, cold, calculated hatred, not emotional but logical. The kind of scream a god might make if you stabbed it in the eye, and it realized, for the first time, it could bleed. Max grinned through the pain. "Yeah, that's right," he muttered. "You feel that? That's what happens when you poke the junkyard dogs." The beam cut off. The ship pulled back. But it wasn't retreating. It was regrouping. 2 more ships shimmered into visibility above the horizon. Silent. Watching. That's when Max understood. They weren't reacting to a military threat. They didn't fear Earth's weapons. They were tracking something else. Human unpredictability. These creatures thrived on control. Every move calculated. Every life tagged. Every city catalogued. But Earth was a chaotic mess of tribalism, revenge, desperation, and spite. There was no logic in how humans fought, and that scared the hell out of something that was pure logic. Reza stumbled up beside him, coughing. "That pulse, we hurt it, or at least disrupted its mapping function. They're blind for a few seconds when the disruptor spikes." Max nodded. "That's all we need." Danik crawled over, dragging a scorched metal fragment from the first ship. It pulsed faintly, like it was still alive. "We kill one," he said, voice hoarse. "And we make the others watch." Max looked down at the fragment. Alien tech. Probably deadly. Probably cursed. But he saw it differently. It was a warning. Not to humanity, but to them. A group of battered, half-mad survivors in the middle of the desert had just pushed back, even after being erased, burned, hunted, and they were still standing. Max held up the fragment, turned to the watchers above, and raised his voice. "You picked the wrong species." A pause. Then the sky cracked, not with thunder, but with a response. The invaders finally sent something down. Not a ship, not a drone. A single being. It touched the ground like a shadow. No noise, no tremor, just arrival. Humanoid, faceless, wrapped in a second skin that shimmered like mercury. No weapons, no armor, just presence. Max didn't blink. Danik whispered, "What the hell is that?" Max stepped forward. It's their messenger," Reza added. "Or their executioner." Max smiled, no humor in his eyes. "Doesn't matter. We're sending it back in pieces." It stood barely 6 feet tall, same as any man, but it felt taller somehow, like space bent around it. The thing didn't move, didn't speak. No mouth, no eyes, just smooth silver skin that shimmered with a fluid-like texture, as if it wasn't made of solid matter at all. Max stared at it from 15 feet away, gripping the alien fragment Danik had dragged from the wreckage. The others had drawn back behind cover. But Max didn't. He didn't believe in playing safe anymore. Playing safe is what got Earth farmed. The thing finally moved, not by stepping forward, but by shifting. 1 second it was in front of him. The next, 2 feet closer, no visible movement. It glided in a way that ignored physics. And somehow, in Max's head he heard a sound. Not with his ears, but buried deep in his consciousness. A voice without voice, a thought not his own. "Stop!" Max barked a laugh. Too late. His trigger finger twitched. But the voice came again, colder now, like ice water in the back of his mind. "Primitive, you will not win." Max didn't answer with words. He took 2 fast steps forward and threw the alien fragment straight into the thing's chest. It hit, and for the first time, the perfect, faceless form flinched. The skin warped, shimmered, cracked, just a little as if something beneath it had never been touched before. The fragment clattered to the dirt. The creature looked down slowly. Unacceptable. It raised an arm, no fingers, just a limb that extended and began to glow, blue lines pulsing like veins under a microscope. Danik fired, clean headshot from 40 yards out. But the bullet stopped mid-air, not bounced, not deflected, just stopped, hanging there like time itself had paused. The faceless one turned toward the sniper's nest. The bullet reversed course, fast. Max dove sideways, but he was too slow to stop it. It struck Danik just above the eye, clean, precise, dropped him like a bag of cement. Reza screamed, sprinting towards the fallen soldier. Max grabbed him and yanked him down just as another pulse surged from the creature. The sand behind them vaporized, not melted, erased, a hole in the world itself. Max gritted his teeth. Danik was gone. The bastard didn't even get to die in a fight. He got turned into an example. The invader was still standing where it had landed, not advancing, just observing again. "Your resistance feeds us. Your rage reveals design." Max stood, blood running down his forehead from the fall. He spat. "Yeah? You want rage? Try this." He clicked his comms unit. "Reza, the emitter." Reza's eyes widened. "It'll fry everything in 100 yards." "Then get clear." Reza hesitated, then ran. The creature tilted its head, not in confusion, but calculation. Max took one last look at Danik's body. "You didn't break us. You just pissed us off." The emitter spiked. The world screamed in white noise. A pulse like the core of a storm exploded from the tower behind Max, flooding the canyon with a burst of pure static energy, ripping through airwaves, frying tech, and slamming into the faceless invader like a sledgehammer made of sound. It staggered. Real pain. Its skin flickered like a glitching screen. For one brief second, it wasn't seamless. It wasn't perfect. It was wounded. Max ran, grabbing the dropped alien fragment on the way. He tackled the thing, slamming the shard into its cracked chest. It didn't scream, but Max felt something in his bones, like an ancient song unraveling, a collapse inside a machine too arrogant to think it could fall apart. The being burst in a spray of light and shrapnel, imploding into itself and vanishing with a soundless snap, leaving behind only heat and silence. Max lay on the ground, coughing, ears ringing. The smell of ozone and ash burned his lungs. His left arm was numb. Danik was gone. Half the camp was wrecked, but the invader was dead. Dead. The first real kill. Razor returned, panting, burned but alive. Jesus, what was that thing? Max sat up slowly. Doesn't matter. He looked up at the sky. 3 more ships hovered, watching. They sent one of their best, he said. We sent it back in pieces. He raised his voice, this time loud enough for everyone, and everything to hear. You wanted to farm us, study us, use us. He spat blood and grinned. But now you've got a war. They tried to erase the footage. They blanked every satellite, jammed every signal. But they didn't count on analog. A scavenger in Nevada, old-school radio freak, had been running a VHS camcorder through a pair of binoculars when Max brought that thing down. And he caught it all. The shimmering enemy, the static pulse, the explosion that swallowed it whole. And within hours, that shaky, grainy footage was passed hand to hand, flash drive to flash drive, burnt onto DVDs like it was gospel. Because to Earth, it was. Proof. Proof they could bleed. Proof they could die. Every corner of the world felt it. Resistance wasn't just spreading, it was surging. In São Paulo, a crew of former gang enforcers rigged a black market EMP bomb from stolen hospital tech and brought down a drone hive that had been patrolling over favelas for a week. In Turkey, a retired tank commander with Parkinson's led a dozen farmers into a field with nothing but Molotovs and tractor parts. And they tore open a crawler unit's exoshell like it was tin. People weren't waiting for orders anymore. They were hunting. Back at the dead grid bunker, Max sat at a metal table, staring at a fractured shard from the faceless invader. It was pulsing still, dim, rhythmic, like a dying heartbeat. Razor had tried scanning it with every tool they had, but it defied all human tech. It didn't read as metal, organic, or even matter. It's alive, Razor finally muttered. Not just tech. It thinks. Good, Max said coldly. Then maybe it remembers what we did to its buddy. Razor looked pale. We're not ready for a counterstrike. We don't have enough weapons. Hell, we don't even have food for the week. Max tapped the table, staring at the pulsing shard. We don't need more weapons. We need more people like Danik. There was a silence, the kind that always followed when someone remembered the dead. Razor said nothing, but he didn't argue. A new sound broke the moment, a slow, grinding, mechanical clatter. One of the younger fighters rushed in, breathless. Max, you need to see this. Outside, the sky was dark, not from night, but from smoke. Something was burning far off in the desert. But that wasn't what stopped Max cold. Above them, one of the invader ships, the same kind that hovered, silent and godlike before, was falling. Not landing. Crashing. It spun in slow agony, pieces shearing off like silver skin being flayed in midair. A deep roar followed, the kind that vibrated through your chest and made you feel like the planet was growling. The ship slammed into a mesa 2 miles out, an impact so heavy the ground shook under Max's boots. Fire belched into the sky. Chunks of tech the size of buses flew like broken bones. Max's jaw clenched. Someone got to them before we did. An hour later, they found out who. A convoy rolled in, modified trucks, half covered in mud and welded armor. Leading the front, a massive, oil-stained vehicle with a mounted cannon that didn't look like any human machine. Max raised his rifle, but the truck's door opened before he could speak. Out stepped a woman, tall, gaunt, covered in burns. Her eyes were steel. Her voice was ash. "Name's Wren," she said. "We took down that ship." Northeast Cell Max lowered his weapon. "That you?" He nodded toward the smoke. She cracked a smile. "Yeah, and we salvaged half the wreck, even found a live one in the rubble." Max narrowed his eyes. "A prisoner? Not exactly." They opened the back of the truck. Inside, chained in layers of reinforced steel and wire, was a second faceless one, barely conscious, flickering in and out of visibility. It twitched like a broken machine, but its chest still pulsed that same soft rhythm. Weak, but there. Rez's mouth dropped. "It's alive?" "For now," Ren said, lighting a cigarette. "We've got questions. I think it has answers." Max stepped closer, staring into the void where its face should have been. "You're going to tell us why you're here," he muttered. "You're going to tell us what you want, how to stop you, and if you lie, I'll show you how pain works down here." The thing didn't move. But something in the air changed. It was afraid. And that was all Max needed to know. They weren't gods. They weren't invincible. They were dying, just slower than they expected. Earth wasn't giving up. It was coming for blood now. The makeshift interrogation room was a repurposed ammo depot deep beneath the dead grid base. No cameras, no mics. Just rusted steel walls, flickering lights, and the constant hum of power from backup generators wired together with the desperation of men who had nothing left to lose. The thing was strapped to a reinforced metal chair, chained down with 5 layers of titanium alloy and crude magnetic clamps Razor had engineered to scramble its internal systems. It wasn't moving, not blinking, not breathing, not in any way that made sense, just pulsing, that faint, sick rhythm in its chest like a dying signal waiting to cut out. Max stood across from it, arms folded, face expressionless. Beside him, Ren leaned against the wall, shotgun slung casually over her shoulder, watching like a hawk ready to end something. Razor sat behind a panel of equipment, scanning vitals, frequencies, patterns, anything that might give them a crack in this thing's skull. "You sure it's alive?" Max asked. Razor nodded once. "Barely, but yeah, it's thinking, or calculating." Max stepped forward, boots echoing. "Then let's make it think faster." He slammed the table. The vibration hit the thing's chest. The pulsing skipped. Then it twitched just once. A ripple moved through its surface like glass reacting to a touch. "Speak," Max growled. Nothing. No voice. No movement. Ren snorted. "Maybe it needs a reason." She stepped forward, pulled a sharpened piece of its own wreckage from her belt, and stabbed it into the creature's shoulder. There was no blood. But the thing jerked. The pulsing intensified. Then, finally, in Max's mind, again, not through sound, but a forceful invasion of thought, "You cannot comprehend." Max leaned in, eyes cold. "Try me." A pause. Then came the flood. Not words, images, feelings, ancient data. The world flickered around him. Not literally, but in his head, everything shifted. Cities without names, skies made of glass, entire planets reduced to ash under cold stars. The invaders, billions of them, moving through galaxies like shadows, absorbing knowledge, stripping life, cataloguing entire species like items in a drawer. They weren't conquerors, they were cleaners. Civilizations grew too wild, too chaotic. They intervened, not with war, but with erasure, precision, control. They believed themselves architects of balance, removing chaos before it could infect the greater web of existence. Earth was a mistake, a planet left unharvested for too long. And in that delay, humanity evolved into something they didn't understand. Max felt it hit him like a bullet in the chest. They were scared, not of weapons, not of governments, but of free will, emotion, rage, that unpredictable, volatile madness that made humans willing to die just to spite something stronger. The invaders couldn't process it, couldn't erase it fast enough. Humanity was corruptive, a species that infected order with rebellion. The creature shuddered under the weight of its own projection. It had gone too deep, shared too much. Max stepped back, breathing hard. So that's what this is. Not war, not conquest. He looked at Ren. It's containment. Razor, still watching the monitors, spoke slowly. They're not here to rule us. They're here to erase the infection before it spreads. Ren grinned. We're a disease. Max nodded grimly. And now we're airborne. The invader began to destabilize, skin flickering, signals spiking erratically. Razor scrambled to hold the connection. It's breaking down! Max, it's trying to pull back! Let it! The creature convulsed. Once, twice, and then its form crumpled inward like a dying star, imploding without sound, leaving behind a scorch mark and a smell like electricity and rot. Silence followed. No cheers, no victory speech, just the heavy realization of what they were really up against. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. It was fighting to prove that the worst thing in the galaxy wasn't war or entropy. It was a man with nothing left to lose. Max turned to Ren. We need to take the fight to them. Razor looked up sharply. You want to go up there? Max stared at the ash-stained chains. They think we're animals in a cage. I say we kick the cage door down and start dragging monsters out by the throat. Ren cracked her knuckles. Then we'll need ships, technology fighters. Max looked her dead in the eye. We'll build them. We'll steal them. Doesn't matter. A message was already being drafted. A global broadcast, analog encrypted pirate signal. Max's voice, hoarse, filled the bunker. This is not a war we asked for. This is not about saving peace. This is about survival, ours and theirs. If you can fight, stand. If you can build, work. If you can bleed, make sure they do too. Earth is not a farm. It's not a project. It's a graveyard. And we're the ones digging. The launch site wasn't made for war. It was an abandoned mining station in northern Canada, buried beneath 50 feet of ice and secrecy. No government oversight, no council, just old blueprints, stolen alien tech, and 100 men and women who'd had their lives torn apart and were too angry to stay on the ground. Max stood at the edge of the hangar, staring up at the beast they'd built. The ship was cobbled together from the wreckage of 3 downed invader cruisers, human military scraps, and raw, unsanctioned genius. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't graceful. But it worked. It growled when it powered up. They called it Revenant, because Earth didn't come back to talk. It came back to haunt. Reza, smeared in grease and sweat, adjusted the coil stabilizers on the starboard engine. He hadn't slept in 40 hours, but his hands were still steady. Drive core's ready. She'll hold, if you don't slam her into a black hole on the way in. Max nodded. She only needs to hold long enough to punch a hole through their walls. Ren strapped into the pilot chair behind him, shotgun still within reach. We hit their relay tower, hijack their comm systems, and dump every corrupted signal we've got into their hive mind. Turn their own design against them. Max looked over the team. Ex-military, smugglers, cyberpunks, outlaws. Every one of them broken, burned, and pissed off. The kind of people who'd already been told they weren't worth saving. And now they were humanity's first strike team off-world. The world below was burning, cities still in lockdown. The council? Still silent. Maybe dead. Maybe hiding in some luxury bunker and hoping things would work out without them. Didn't matter anymore. The world didn't belong to them. Not after this. Launch it, Max ordered. The Revenant rose with a scream of defiance, tearing through atmosphere with the same fury that built it. Stars spun above, cold and silent as they cleared orbit. But the moment they passed through Earth's magnetosphere, it began. The signal. That presence. It hit their minds like a knife, thoughts not their own, alien logic crashing into human instincts, cold whispers trying to rewrite emotion. Ren gritted her teeth. They're trying to hijack our thoughts. Max closed his eyes. Let the pain in. Let the grief in. All of it. Danique's corpse, the civilians who disappeared, the empty council seats, the silence of erased cities. He forced it outward like a scream from his soul. The signal cracked. The invaders recoiled. Max smiled. We're not just resisting anymore. We're infecting you. The Revenant broke into their orbit, a hidden moon station, cloaked in a gravity fold, orbiting behind Saturn like a spider behind glass. Alien cruisers circled it silently, unaware, unthreatened, until Earth's scrap ship fired its first shot. A magnetic cannon, jury-rigged from melted drone parts and human spite, sent a high-velocity shard straight through the nearest cruiser's core. The explosion was violent, crude, beautiful. The rest noticed then. They sent drones, fighters, specters, those faceless humanoid things, slipping through space like ghosts, but the Revenant was faster than she looked. Reza rerouted the power grid into the hull, turning the whole ship into a flying EMP bomb. Drones fried mid-flight. Specters shorted out. One slammed into the hull and exploded like glass under pressure. They reached the relay tower embedded in the station's shell. Ren docked hard, blowing the hatch open with a stolen pulse grenade. Inside, it was like walking into a hive. Slick walls, no seams, machines that breathed, lights that moved when you looked away. Reza dropped to his knees and started the upload. A virus, a signal built from humanity's worst emotions. Rage, grief, betrayal, a cocktail of unpredictability and raw instinct the invaders' systems couldn't parse. Max and Ren held the corridor as the walls began to scream. "Reza!" Max shouted. "Almost there!" More specters. Dozens, crawling from the walls. They moved without noise, without mercy, but they couldn't hide from bullets. Not today. Ren emptied 3 clips into them before switching to a blade. Max grabbed one by the throat and slammed it into the wall, watching it glitch and collapse into a smear of light. Then Reza stood, blood running from his nose. "It's in!" The station shuddered. Alarms, strange and alien, wailed in frequencies that hurt to hear. The lights turned red. All of them. Max could feel it. They were panicking. Every protocol in their hive was unraveling, logic crashing against something it couldn't define. Choice. The emotion. Humanity. Ren grinned. They're choking on the same thing they came to erase. They sprinted back to the Revenant as the station collapsed inward, its systems eating themselves alive in a fit of corruption. As they launched away, behind them, the once pristine invader hub lit up in flames, beautiful, silent explosions blooming in space like flowers of vengeance. Max looked down at Earth from the viewport, still broken, still scarred, but not silent anymore. "They'll come back," Reza said quietly. Max nodded. "Then we'll be waiting." Ren leaned back, lit a cigarette from a live wire, and smiled like a wolf. "Let 'em come. This time we're not hiding. This time, we're the invasion."